Good morning, you're very welcome along to Monday morning's OTB AM, and that was quite the weekend of consequence, wasn't it? Messi and Ronaldo both dumped mercilessly out of the World Cup. The mighty Russians causing Andres Iniesta to retire from international football, and of course Cork once again Munster hurling champions. A draw then in Croke Park yesterday evening as well between Kilkenny and Galway in the Leinster Hurling Championship final. And because of Michael Bublé, we're going to have the replay in Munster, a Leinster team against a Connacht team in Munster. That's quite the scenario we've got on our hands, and potentially the next Leinster or nowhere situation, the next hashtag on the scene for the next couple of days. I'm delighted to be joined in studio this morning by Anthony Moyles. Anthony, how are things?
Hey Eoin, how you doing?
Not too bad. The big one though from the weekend is, and the big scenario is the end of Mayo. Apparently that it's all over for Mayo. They're never going to come close to an All-Ireland ever again.
Yeah, all finished ever again. Yeah, you know, it is sad to see them gone. Kildare were fully deserving of their victory, and I suppose, you know, vilified, you know, during the week. If they had lost, what would have been written about Kildare? You know, like, I mean, you know, they could win it on paper, but they couldn't win it. You know, all the talk, etc., etc. So there's an awful lot of pressure on that squad. But to be fair, they stood up to it, and I thought they should have won by a few more. Yeah,
like, we will get into the nuts and bolts of this game throughout the day, but we did want to start on Mayo. And like, is it the end of an era? Because it seemed very premature. Immediately, as soon as the full-time whistle went, it was like, right, done, pack it all in. Mayo, you can forget about them as far as All-Ireland contention is concerned for the next few years.
Where I think an awful lot of that is coming from is the fact of, and we've talked about this on numerous occasions, and I think it's integral to the fact of what has actually occurred to this team, is that they've kept going to the well with certain players. And yes, they've had their injuries this year, but you have your injuries because if you don't have a ready replacement to come in, or a guy who's really pushing you hard and who, say, the public hasn't seen. So in other words, you lose Sheahan, you lose Tom Parsons, but yet where's the rest of the guys that they've had, you know, to really kind of step into that position? They've had to kind of rob Peter to pay Paul, put Dermot O'Connor in midfield, put Keegan in midfield, and then they even take Keegan's injury. So they haven't had, you know, over the last number of years, it has been coming a kind of thing. They've had a lot of luck with injuries over the last number of years when you consider the run that they've gone on. But this year, I think just the luck ran out. So they've picked up the injuries to some key players, you know, and probably some spiritual leaders in the team. And then they still yet, and we've spoken about this numerous times, they still yet haven't developed a person who can come in, or two guys who can come in off the bench or even start, who's scared the living daylights out of defenders. Yeah. You know, if Andy Moran doesn't operate, which Kildare had their homework done on, they really are a little bit toothless up front. Yeah, it's true. Like, when you say it there about the luck with injuries, it's almost reminiscent of Chelsea winning the Premier League the season before last, when they had a core of 14, 15 players, and they had the same subs coming on into the same positions week in, week out, and they just looked out for the entire 38 game week spell. And it seemed to have been the way with Mayo, although they didn't have any silverware to show for it in the end in an All-Ireland level. But it seemed that it was the same team year after year after year. And like, just even chatting a little bit off air, without being too harsh on Mayo, because they have been one of the greatest stories we've had over the last couple of years, it is almost a definition of insanity that we haven't seen more of an influence on youth or anything like that, or a huge breeding of new talent throughout the leagues even over the past couple of years. Or maybe there has been, and Stephen Rocher just deemed it not to be good enough. There could be that. You know, I'm not privy enough to it. I'm not close enough to it. I've spoken to a few people who are Mayo supporters and would be staunch Mayo supporters, who would say, you know, you always get the usual, he should be playing X, Y, Z. So there's certain other fellas down there. But we haven't seen it. We haven't seen Rocher maybe giving them a chance, or maybe just that depth of talent isn't there. But, you know, really the only one who stands out over the last number of years is Duggan. You know, Paddy Duggan, who I think scored 4 from play the other night. The guy who was, because you're not just talking about coming in and fitting in, you're talking about coming in and raising the level to the next level, because you have to. They haven't won the All-Ireland. So you need to have another person who's going to come in and actually keep pushing you on. If you talk to any of the Dublin players who were around, they said that any of these new kids on the block who come in raise the level again. They're not just happy enough to come in on the panel and say, yes, I want to be part of this. You're actually going, no, I want to raise this even further, which also then helps you lift your game. And I think that has probably, if you say yes, maybe it is you know, a kind of a measure of insanity, that there hasn't been enough focus on getting that over the last, 10 years? You know, if you've picked up a 15, a 16-year-old 7, 8 years ago, he'll be 23, 24 now, and he should be in his pomp, and really, as I say, terrifying defences. So and I know we're speaking a bit off air, but I think Kerry have done that, whereas Mayo didn't do it. And I think Kerry will reap the rewards of that for the next number of years, whereas Mayo now, with this generation coming to an end, they're going to have to go back in and really try to unearth that again.
Yeah, if you want to make another kind of cross-sport comparison here, you could almost compare it to Argentina and the golden generation that produced no fruits when it comes to the very top trophies in their given sport. One of the things we're going to be chatting about later on in the show is whether or not this is the greatest Irish sports story you've had over the past couple of years. Ger was tweeting a little bit later on. Let us know if you think that's a correct take or just a really bad take from Gilroy over the last couple of days, that Mayo are the best sports story we've had this decade in Irish sport. But let's just tell you what's coming up on today's show. We're going to kick things off in a couple of moments with the back pages this morning, the hurling dominating things.
OTB AM. To Screwfix.ie.
We'll just go straight to the back pages. On the back page of the Irish Independent this morning, it is hurling all the way. It is the Defiant Kilkenny makes statement of intent. Lessons learned from Pearse Stadium defeat as Cats have bear their championship clause. It was kind of, I don't know how to really describe that game yesterday in Croke Park. A lot of people saying it was a terrible game, and then the more you read and look into the proper hurling man's analysis of the game, it's like, wait a minute, the coverage of this is actually quite light, quite positive. There was great fielding, great aerial ability, great defence. I dare say that if this game occurred in football yesterday, it would have got absolutely torn to shreds by certain pundits. But rightly, like when you actually look back on it, some of the skills on show were absolutely fantastic, and maybe the hurling pundits are leading the way.
Well, are you allowed to tear a game of hurling to shreds
Absolutely
these days?
not.
No,
especially not when the ground is hard and it's in the middle of summer.
Listen. Well, like, no matter what, you're going to find something endearing, whether it's just pulling on the ball on the ground. Like there was some unbelievable catches. There was some, as I say, fine feeling, brilliant defending, real kind of putting your body on the line stuff. But when you look at the kind of total scores relative to the Munster final, you're kind of saying, wow, conditions couldn't have been better. The ball would have been travelling, in that kind of area yesterday, probably further than it ever would have travelled. The pitch was in immaculate condition. Some unbelievable forwards on show, TJ Reid and Canning, etc., just to name a few. So you definitely would have. But I think it was I know Cody was saying what's an arm wrestle, but it was too big. Definitely a big physical side of Galway. But Kilkenny, I was listening to Tommy Welch, obviously, with you lads yesterday, and he was saying they had to bring something different. I think they did to a certain degree, but they also just tried to match them physically and said, we're not bound down from this challenge. So an awful lot of that was their half-back line, plucking balls out of the air, physically trying to dominate that half-forward line. I'd say the next game could be, completely different. As a matter of fact, I think they might just say, okay, well, we've sounded each other out now, and we need to try to find something different to beat them. Yeah,
it's a good point, because they'll have designs on later on in the summer as well. It's like Kilkenny laying down that marker, and it's like the next game, it's kind of like, well, you know what, we've shown our hand to the extent we want to show our hand. But just on that point you were saying there about summer hurling, I'd never heard this before, but Brendan Cummins on the TV yesterday was talking about how it's not only the hard ground and the kind of the drought of the ball, it's actually in the heat that we would have experienced yesterday, the inside of the slitter would actually have warmed up a bit. I'm not sure whether it actually get to the point of melting, but it actually allows the slitter to travel further.
Oh, there you go.
Well, which I didn't know.
Thank you, Brendan, for confirming my thesis.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just thought it was golf balls. Yeah, but I suppose maybe it does. Well, I don't know how warm it will get, but maybe there's like the Patriots did a couple of years ago with the American football. Maybe they're in there heating up the balls, before they go out on the pitch.
So sticking a few slitters in the microwave to get the upper hand is definitely the top level of slitter skullduggery I've ever heard. We'll move on to the front page of the Irish Examiner Sports section this morning, and they're leading with Cork. Munster marvels, reads the headline here. Cork back-to-back titles, stretch unbeaten provincial run to 8, which is... It's like an unbeaten provincial run of 8 is obviously a record when it comes to provincial games, but obviously that comes as a result of the round robin and all of that. But it's how quickly this Cork thing has changed, hasn't it? Like last year, it was great to have them back, and now we're already at the point of like, God, Jesus, we're already sick of the sea of red onto the pitch. But I'm delighted for John Myler.
You certainly would.
I'm delighted for him. I'm delighted for John Myler because there was a lot of criticism of him at the start of the year, and the way that the Munster round robin worked, it turned the whole thing on the head. It allowed somebody to take the opportunity that was given to them because Waterford and Tip were out of the picture. And in a microcosm yesterday, we can see him with his son David there, obviously on screen. like I think the round robin was just put into a microcosm yesterday with the way Cork just took that game by the scruff of the neck and said, listen, do you know what? There's an opportunity here when they got it back to a level game.
Yeah.
And that goal just before half-time, which was key, and they ran away with it in the end. And that's kind of what this Munster Hurling Championship has been about. Whoever had the opportunity and whoever was going to take that opportunity and run with it was always going to win this.
Yeah, I think it was. He seems like a really good guy. He's an excellent coach, you know, and he seems that way. Like, I mean, the goal before half-time, it was a really strange game. It was a game of two halves, but it's funny. That 2 or 3 minutes just prior to half-time, I think, was an absolute killer for Clare. Because Clare were cruising. Yeah. Absolutely cruising. No matter what they were doing, it was working for them. And, you know, if you watch it, and actually a goal previous after that, I think the last goal that Cork got, Clare fellas, it reminded me a little bit of, you know, when you go back to, say, Dublin, the time they were beaten by Kerry, where you had fellas pushing up the field, expecting, say, another guy to get a ball, and were in an offensive position, but then it didn't happen. If you watch the Clare-Cork goal, especially for the last goal, fellas pushing up the field, next thing it breaks down, and they're chasing back. And even for the first goal, which was the killer goal, I really felt, because that 4-point swing, where you should be going in up 8, and they only went in up, I think, 3 or 4 at half-time, that was a real killer. You can imagine the two dressing rooms. Like, I mean, Clare's dressing room would have been, we've done all the hurling here for the last 35, 37 minutes, and we're only 4 up. And whereas Cork are saying, lads, we haven't played, and we're only 4 down, so let's just get back into it. And the difference, you could actually see it straight away, and it just came from really lazy defending. You know, really lazy defending, which is poor for a Clare team that were chasing everything down, but just a couple of guys just let runners go, and ultimately cost them.
Did the old kind of psychological trick of staying in the dressing room 4 minutes longer than the opposition work? Like, does that work anymore? Did it ever work?
I don't know.
It keeps you thinking for a little while as well, especially when you've just conceded 1-1 to finish off the half, and you're out there, you're like, Jesus, what are they talking about inside?
Yeah. It's probably not a bad little ploy, you know, like, I mean, it is. There's certainly not, because you kind of get roiled up, you come out, and then you're kind of just standing around. It's like, will someone get a ball? Will we puck around the ball? Will we just chat to each other? What exactly will we do?
What are you supposed to do?
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So it's an interesting one. We'll chat hurling a little bit later on in the show, reflecting on those two provincial finals yesterday, and of course the other provincial final, Galway against Kilkenny, which ended in a draw, set for Thurles this Sunday at 3 o'clock. The front page of the Irish Times, Sports Monday then, is Russian endeavour proves too much for a fading Spain. That's Ken Early's piece. And Malachy Clerkin reports from Thurles yesterday. Impressive Cork march on to semi-finals. So a couple of the same stories there. Russian endeavour indeed proving too much for fading Spain pretty much sums the whole thing up. A Spain that passed Russia off the park to the extent that no other team had ever done before, breaking passing records left, right and centre. And it was repetition. Russia there could have just stood with their arms folded and just watched them for most of the afternoon.
It was like, I mean, it was so odd. Like, I don't know if it was arrogance by Spain. I know you're talking to Kevin probably later on, and I'd just like to get his take, because it just seemed that they were kind of saying, listen, we've got the goal, we'll just keep passing the ball, these guys won't break us down, and we're just happy enough to get out of this with a 1-0 win. We'll kind of conserve our energy to a certain degree, and we'll just move on to the next. Like, I mean, it just had a feeling of that. There was no, even Costa up front, like, he would usually be roaring and shouting at fellas to get balls into him. He even seemed happy enough just to be living off pure scraps. Every now and again they'd fire a ball into him, but it was just so left to right. There was no movement forward. There was hardly a ball put forward. And, like, I mean, yes, they owned the ball, but Russia seemed very, very compact, seemed very much in control. And to be fair, Russia then at one stage looked like the only team that actually wanted to even go and win it. You know, like, I mean, it was very odd. There seems to be a very strange dynamic going on in the Spanish thing. Never mind the whole Hierro thing, but it's just everything about it. You know, Iniesta stuff. There's a lot of big personalities there that are impacting that whole thing. And it just seemed off. I thought it seemed off from the Portugal game. You know, I just thought it seemed very strange straight away.
Well, I backed them at 5-1 in the middle of the Portugal game.
Oh, did you? So obviously you saw something completely different.
And clearly Portugal are nothing to be lauded about or to be gloated about. Yeah. So I got that one badly wrong, and I'm not afraid to say it. I got Spain badly wrong on this. But like, we'll get, as you say, we'll get Kevin's take on it a little bit later on. But there's a feeling I get off the Spain team that they're almost victims of their previous success, where they have a great target man in Diego Costa. They showed that against Portugal, the way he managed to forearm smash Pepe and finish beautifully to the back of the net. And they were like, wait a minute, we're Spain. We can't be putting a direct ball into Diego Costa. We've got to pass the ball around nicely.
Yeah.
And he's there moping around. He's like, this is not the centre forward. This is not how you get the best out of your centre forward. And it felt that they were kind of limited by the fact that they had to play this brand of football. As we saw yesterday, they passed him off the park and it was completely ineffective.
Well, but it also goes to the, like, you know, when the Hierro thing happened, you say, well, what kind of influence is he going to have?
Yeah.
So in a situation where he's saying, okay, this isn't going to work, so I think we need to say use Costa. Like, who's going to listen to him? Are they going to say, okay, that's a really good idea, coach? Or are they just going to go, no, sorry, you know, we're running this team here. You're literally a figurehead. So even from that simple, you know, trying to implement a game plan or trying to change things around, or even if we were standing on the side and you might say, I don't think this is really working here. Maybe we should be using Costa a little more. Even though we have absolutely no qualifications to be manager to this, if we were there for the last couple of years, the team might listen to you. Yeah. But for him, they might just go, you know. So that's why the change of the manager was the most strange thing, because it wasn't even the fact of the harshness of it, but all the things that maybe that the team would listen to him, would say, actually, yes, he has a track record, he's been trained, or, you know, he's been there and ever present for the last number of years. We trust him. We understand that he wants to change things, so we will do it. Like, I mean, he was literally, that was going to fall on deaf ears for me yesterday, you know, and I think it was always going to catch them. And I think it just caught them yesterday. Yeah,
it's a good point. We'll move on to the back page of the Times Ireland edition. They're leading with a picture from Cork. Cork rally to claim 53rd title. Rebels shrug off 8-point deficit to sweep past Clare in Munster final. And this other story here, which came out yesterday, it's that Andy Murray is not going to play at Wimbledon. He withdrew yesterday after concluding that he was not physically ready to play in a Grand Slam tournament. It's kind of Wimbledon, Tour de France, all sort of overshadowed for the next 2 weeks for the opening couple of rounds anyway, because of the World Cup. But there is still something that, you know, we get so much of our coverage from the UK and all of that it's going to be hard to look away. This year, though, without Andy Murray, without the lording of it, we're going to miss out on that sort of kind of buying into the macabre nature of watching Andy Murray lose, or we'll have to get behind Kyle Edmund losing, which isn't it's not as fun.
It doesn't have the same ring to it, all right?
It really doesn't. No. And he's mostly South African as well. He's barely British. So there is an element of Andy Murray that kind of, I don't know, do we relate to in Ireland a small bit? The whole sort of, the British only, or the BBC only refer to him as British whenever he's won a Grand Slam, and whenever he loses, he's Scottish again, you know, the old adage. But he is a loss, and Wimbledon kicks off over the next couple of days. And, like, it must be later, because I've certainly got memories of coming home from primary school during the early days of Wimbledon and kind of trying to catch the early rounds. And now it starts in July.
Absolutely. I think probably just school is finishing earlier and earlier every year.
That might be it. Yeah, that's probably we were probably stuck in it until the middle of July. Finally, for me then is the back page of the Racing Post, and from a UK perspective, I love this headline here: England cut to 6-1 as Spain crash out. Now, I was listening to TalkSport last night, and they were kind of half tongue-in-cheek, kind of half seriously saying football is coming home. They're into 6-1, as you can see in the back page of the Racing Post. They were 20-1 at one point before the tournament, and basically Spain were on England's side of the draw. And you kind of talk about the situation with Belgium last week, and it's like, you know, anything could happen. They should top the group. Anything could happen. Anybody could get knocked out. Brazil could get knocked out. Like Belgium could get knocked out. Whatever. Blah blah blah. And then it ends up being the fact that Spain ended up getting knocked out. They were on England's side of the draw, and England are the only side left on their side of the draw that have ever got to a World Cup final. Never mind winning the thing. So football's coming home.
It is. Well, like, I mean, listen, it's good for me. I backed them. I might just cash out.
What did you get them at?
No, 14.
What are you going to do? What's the cash out?
No, I'm not.
Not yet.
No. Like,
you got to keep in it.
Yeah. Like, I mean, it's just for a bit of crack. But you know, I read a lot of the Southgate pieces yesterday and stuff like this. You know, they're obviously doing an awful lot about him. And I was bemoaning the fact that he's wearing a three-piece suit in like whatever degrees of weather. I was going like, man, you know, does he not realise that that's not season long? But then I realised that Marks and Spencers have sold out of pretty much of waistcoats. You know, but there's some tie-in to his uncle or his, you know, that this man used to be very dapper, wore, you know, waistcoat all the time. I have to say, I like Southgate. I like the way he was. Like, I mean, he wasn't like, I mean, a very exciting type of player, but he was solid and all that, and he has brought that, and that kind of stability is what they need. You're kind of waiting and hoping that the wheels come off, like that there's pictures of some night out that they go bananas, but I don't think it's going to happen. And to be fair, they play good football.
Yeah.
You know, they are playing nice football. Like, I mean, like Denmark and Croatia yesterday was
grim.
Oh, it was grim. It was like a Monday night in the Premiership, you know, Stoke versus Sunderland or whatever it was. It was just shocking stuff. Okay, the Spanish game wasn't a whole pile better, but at least England are playing. And you know, we were just chatting off air there. It's amazing when if you can get a team who are a little bit flair, you know, kind of like a Latin team or someone like this. So you would hope that maybe Colombia will come out and play rather than just shutting up shop. I think England have an unbelievable chance. Like, they really have. It's kind of starting to. Pieces are just starting to fall in together for them.
Yeah,
you know,
it's true. Like, I'd almost be, and it's a very good point you make. Like, without kind of tarring everybody from that part of the world with one brush. Like, if you look at the Peruvians, it was a great example in the group stage. They came to entertain their fans, the fans who had sold their houses and all that sort of stuff. They want to give them a good time, and I think it's the same to a certain extent with the Colombians. A little bit more pragmatic. The Peruvians were very naive to a certain extent.
Yeah.
A little bit more pragmatic in that sense, but still, expression is important to them. It's not like the Danes last night who were like, the result is all that matters, and their fans were happy to go along with that. We would be the same if we were there.
Yes.
Expression is key. That there's almost a sense that if they do get past Colombia, they get the winner of Sweden and Switzerland, and that's pragmatism absolutely at its height right there. Especially if it's going to be Switzerland, ranked 6th in the world, by winning games 1-0 all the way through.
Yeah.
So there's a good point there, and like that could be the one that trips them up. That, you know what, it could be, we could be sitting here on Wednesday morning thinking to ourselves, England are going to win the World Cup, and there's still that banana skin of Sweden or Switzerland yet to come.
Yeah, like, I mean, they can play it. You know, they've probably so much in the sense of they've enough Premiership players who are playing with, say, top teams, but also who are playing with less of the top teams. So in other words, they're able to kind of mix it. They can play it. They can be pragmatic about it. They can be defensive about it, or they can actually have enough flair players to try and hurt you. So they have a little bit of both. It's not. You know. It's whereas some of the teams you've just mentioned there, it's either one or the other.
Yeah, true.
You know, whereas they can do a little bit of both. And even the fact that we're still talking about it now should be scary to them.
We're like, no matter what we say, we're obsessed with England, and it's great. I mean, like,
absolutely.
I don't think too many people will begrudge Southgate in the squad if they manage to go all the way.
Yeah.
You can tweet us at Off the Ball. You can comment on the stream if you want to get in touch. We will be talking Mayo in a little while. Are they the greatest Irish sports story you've had this decade? That's going to be our hot take / topic over the next hour or so. What's going on the back pages of the tabloids?
Yeah, you've got the Herald Sport here. There's Dermot Connolly playing over for Donegal in Boston. He hit 3-8 yesterday, I believe. Yeah. Not wearing a gum shield, I see. During the game. Probably should have got a black card for that. A yellow card. Yeah, 3-8. He's in. He has his fellow St. Vincent's clubmate Shane Carty, and he has Eoin McHugh is actually playing with a couple of Corofin lads as well. So it's pretty tough stuff over there in the old States.
You played over there for a while.
Yeah, I played after college in '99. All those years ago, I went over and played in San Diego. It's just it's a physical league. You know, it really is. You know, and the refereeing is just kind of, keep her going, lads. You know, so it's you know, you're definitely. If there's a flair player such as him, he'll get plenty of it, you know. But you look, he's well able for it, you know. But what a loss to the championship!
Huge loss. Like even just seeing him wearing number 10 there, just you could just picture him coming off the wing yesterday with the ball in hand, and as you say, the referees letting the game flow. Probably both managers saying, "Or just go out and play away with it." There he is on screen there complaining to the ref, or maybe to one of his teammates for not passing him the ball. We can only speculate at this juncture. Who did you play for when you, like, was it a county by county breakdown in San Diego?
No. Like, I mean, we went over, it was San Diego, we're just kind of getting going. We'd have one of the guys I went over with had connection there, so it was many moons ago. But that was good, it was great. Look, I mean, it was more a bit of fun.
You played for Meath at the time?
I played for the Meath Juniors, and I was asked to come into the panel by Sean Boylan, and I had everything booked and everything else, and I said, look, I've everything booked, so I didn't go into the panel.
This is 99.
Yeah. And I thought to myself, I was watching the games going, you know, in San Diego at 7 o'clock in the morning or whatever it was, in some early bar, and Leinster finals, thinking, me'll be in plenty of All-Irelands, I'll be okay. That was the last All-Ireland win. Good man.
No.
Yeah, so I came back for the All-Ireland final, watched it, and I was like, that was great. Yeah. Not that, like, I mean, look, I might have gone into the panel and he may have said, best of luck, you know, you're out. But it's funny, we won the junior championship that year. My club, the St. Paul's, we won the junior championship that year. And I was literally home. I got home for the semi-final and the final. And in typical Boylan fashion, when we won it in October or whatever it was, and the league was Christmas and after Christmas, and Meath were playing Clare in the first round of the league in Navan, and he had me named as a sub. Sure, I hadn't a clue. Like, I mean, when we came in after, we're celebrating the victory, one of the lads said, oh, by the way, you're 17 or 18 on the Meath, and then he came and brought me out and brought me around, started introducing me to the lads and all this kind of stuff, you know, just kind of, and then he says, go, he says, enjoy your victory. He says, I'll see you Tuesday night training. I was like, uh-oh. I plan on still being celebrating on Tuesday night. Yeah. But, that's just typical him. But, it was, it was a pity, but, it was a great experience. But
I'm sure being in San Diego makes up to a certain extent for what you missed that summer.
Yeah, a small bit. Yeah. It was good fun though.
I'm sure it was.
Yeah, it's a great place. Yeah.
Did you ever kick 3-8 or whatever in a game?
Not a chance. No.
This is just on screen. We've got a picture of Diarmuid Connolly with his new whip, as he says. # Mustang, # Shelby GT500. Posted 13 hours ago. He is living the life over there.
Things have changed. We had a car that was like remember Wayne's World?
Yes.
That was the car we had. Like, there was 4 of us bet into this thing with no air conditioning. We actually drove to Las Vegas in it, and someone told us before we go that if you put the heat up to the max, it'll cool the thing down, and then you can get the air conditioning. So literally we were driving through the desert with the heat on, full blast, literally in our boxer shorts going, and we nearly died. I don't know how we made it. Anyway, so we weren't in a Mustang. That's how the other half lived.
Absolutely. Right. Jesus, he is loving it over there. And you know what? Good luck to him. It's good. Like, obviously, Mustangs and all that can't bring happiness, but like as long as he's happy over there enjoying his life, it's a good break. It's a sea change, isn't it, from what he would be experiencing over here, getting ready for the Super 8s and all that. I think he's carried in a couple of the other papers, but I think it's mostly GAA in Spain.
Yeah,
GAA.
Yeah. You've got the Irish Daily Mail. You've Adios to Spain. You've Isco in the back there doing pulling the shorts up move, which seems to be a regular thing now before you take a penalty and stuff like that. Ramos looking fairly dejected. Massive amount of, I couldn't get over the amount of times the Spanish players were running into the referee. Serious amount of giving out and into the referee. Russia were much more focused. Again, you've got the Irish Sun, you've got Spain and Joy. Surge tears after KO. You've got a funny one here. Jim's tribe's eyes are on Jim. Jim McGuinness has emerged as a shock contender to take over at Galway United, which is a strange one. And then you've just got Glove's story. That's in the back of what's this one? The Star, and you've Mile High after Munster glory again. So that's the Cork lads. Davy Myler there up with down with his father at the match yesterday. So great win for them. Yeah, absolutely. Let's have a look at some of the Russian back pages, and I presume actually their front pages this morning. There's miracle and all that sort of stuff is the word we'll see. So this is Richard Conway, the BBC. Rossykaya Gazeta says, simple miracle. I'm not going to even go through the rest of them. That second title says, fairy tale continues. Sovetski Sport says, ours. RBC says, lone warrior. And Izvestia says, way to go. It's like jubilation, left, right and centre. I like the one at the bottom right there with the Cyrillic language all in red caps. And I'm starting to hear through my ears some music that would suit the situation. I dare say that John Duggan is coming in hot on the line. John Duggan, are you there?
Eoin and Anthony, good morning.
Morning, John.
A jubilant Russia, I dare say, this morning, John.
I never thought I would wear this hat. I bought it when I bought the Ushanka. But given the day that's in it and what's happened here in the last 24 hours, I had to take out the hat and wear it today. So, it's just what a day. What a day for Russia. I can't really think of a bigger day in terms of worldwide focus on Russia in contemporary history. Maybe Yuri Gagarin, who was the first man to go into space, was the last one, but it's hard to top what happened yesterday, lads. Hard to top it.
Yeah, look, what were the scenes like last night? I presume it was just utter chaos.
Well, the first thing was when Akinfeev saved the penalties. I was in the Luzhniki Stadium to watch the match against Spain. I went to the Olympic final in Rio in 2016, and when Brazil beat Germany in the final, it was effectively the whole of the crowd was Brazilian, over 70,000, and the noise was just absolutely deafening. I've never heard a noise like it, and I never thought I would hear it again. And yesterday I heard it again. It's almost like being in a swarm of locusts, in a good way. Just the noise, it's the euphony of the noise. It's very hard to describe. You just almost have to feel it. Just complete pandemonium when Russia went through. And then when I went out, I kind of gave 20 minutes, half an hour for the crowds to disperse a bit. I went outside, thought, this is pretty mellow. They have that song. The only song the Russians really sing is that Seven Nation Army by the White Stripes. That's the one they repeat. Not really a support base for bands or like the South Americans would be. But it was pretty mellow on the metro. And I was thinking, is because there's so much police are so conspicuous here? Is are they just taking it easy? They want to be told off or whatever. But once I got into the main road, straddling the Kremlin and Red Square, the place just went crazy, absolutely crazy. Every single car blaring the horns. Everybody was hanging out of their cars. People were out of the tops of the sunroofs of cars, and it was going on for about 4 or 5 hours. I went and watched Croatia Denmark. When I came out, it was still going on. Thousands of people thronging the streets, just in pure joy and rapture, because they never expected it. I don't think the Russians. They never expected that possibly they get to the last 16 and then they beat the champions of 8 years ago, Spain, in a penalty shootout. The biggest win for Russian football or Soviet football since 1970. And I remember just this one moment, I was looking at a guy who was just waving an ice hockey stick out of his front of his car. And there was another moment when a green Porsche sped by, this most amazing car, and a guy with the most biggest flag I've ever seen. And it just another group of lads like with their shirts off, people jumping into fountains, half clothed. Just brilliant stuff. And I think that it's joy that is so unexpected. Like I remember when they talked about the Walkinstown roundabout in 1990 for the Republic of Ireland. It's like everybody just said, we're just going to go out in the street and see what happens. And that's what happened. And I said a lot of people have got a hangovers today. I don't think there'll be much work done in Russia today throughout the whole of the country.
No, you're probably right. No, I'm actually, when you mentioned the ice hockey stick there, I'm surprised that none of those papers actually led with the term miracle on grass last night, because it seems to be sort of the revenge to the Western world after what happened in the Winter Olympics all those years ago.
Yeah, I was in Kaliningrad the other day, and the sport they're into there is hockey. So, no, but I think football, the Soviet Union's got a huge history with football, back to the European Championship in 1960, which they won. They reached the semi-finals of England's World Cup in 1966. Haven't had the players for a little while, probably since the Arshavin days. But look, they knew what they wanted to do. Once they got that lucky equaliser, it was a deserved penalty, but on the balance of play, it was a fortuitous moment for Russia in the 41st minute to Zuba yesterday. But once that happened, they played for penalties. They put 10 men behind the ball, and they said to Spain, you know what? You come with us and you find a way. And Spain couldn't find a way. It's almost like Spain went to the most expensive restaurant, had their favourite dish, overindulged completely, and then went to the bathroom and got sick. They drove around a roundabout all day. That's like you went to the roundabout and just drove around the roundabout all day. Over 1,000 passes, lads. It was just ridiculous. And I think that it just showed to me there was a lack of coaching there. And this goes back to Lopetegui sacking, Florentino Perez, Real Madrid, Rubiales, the whole thing, as Marca said, is a complete mess from Spain, because they were leaderless and rudderless, and they couldn't break. Iniesta was the only player who might have broken Russia down, but they didn't. And I had a feeling, you know what, I think the feeling kind of happens that Russia are going to do them in the penalties, and Akinfeev then saved the 2 penalties.
Yeah, he's going to become a national hero, isn't he, Akinfeev? He's going to be right up there with all the greats you mentioned at the start. It was like an absolutely iconic moment. And even some journalists inside the Nizhny Novgorod stadium last night posted a video of a completely empty stadium, but a gigantic roar emanating from outside the ground to inside the ground from all the Russian people outside it. Like, he is going to be a national icon. Whatever the Russian version of being knighted is, certainly Vladimir Putin will take him under his wing, I presume, for the rest of his life.
Well, the greatest footballer in Russian history is a goalkeeper, Lev Yashin. The Black Spider, as he was known, because it's actually very dark blue, his clothing. Won the Ballon d'Or in 1963, Lev Yashin, and is a Russian national hero. We remember Dasayev in 1988 when Ronnie Whelan scored the winning goal, or we thought was the winning goal until Russia equalised in the 1-1 draw in Hanover in the European Championship, and he was a great goalkeeper as well, Dasayev. They've got a history of great goalkeepers, Russia, back to Lev Yashin, probably the best goalkeeper of all time. and Akinfeev now following in those footsteps, the captain. They gave it everything. They gave it everything, Russia, and Spain were hoisted on their own petard, and Spain only have themselves to blame. And now Russia play Croatia in the quarterfinals. We're going to say again that Croatia should comfortably win, but in this crazy World Cup, this marvellous, stupendous, all the adjectives you want to use, who knows? And that's why I'm wearing the silly hat today.
What's the fallout, John, for Hierro and Spain? What's the feeling on the ground there now?
I think Hierro, you can't really say anything against Hierro. He's put into the situation. He's a technical director. He was involved in 2010 when they won the World Cup. He never expected, I remember there was the photos of him rowing with the pedigree. He never expected to be put in the situation. He's a national hero. He played over 80 times for his country. He's won Champions Leagues. You can't say anything about Hierro. He's just given this hospital pass of a situation where they got to run a World Cup team. I think I think Real Madrid are just a pain. Personally, I just think they're a pain. And Florentino Perez, it's a pain. Just for me, it's a pain in the neck. And why couldn't you have done your business after the World Cup? It's not all about you. It's not. I know you won 3 Champions Leagues, but listen, like international football is important. It's not all about the club game. And that's just my own personal opinion on it. They could have done this afterwards. The pedigree was naive. How long will the pedigree last at Real Madrid? Doesn't work out for him, he'll be out the door. And where will he be then? And that's the kind of feeling I have about Spain. Whatever about the lack of cutting edge or the tiki-taka and all that kind of stuff. Lack of leaders yesterday as well, I felt. Lack of leadership. They never got out of any kind of first gear. They never had an urgency. They never had a tempo. And you could see it coming. You could see it coming midway through the second half. You could see it coming at full time. You could see it coming halfway through extra time. You could just see this happen. You could see this unfolding in front of your eyes. And they treated the whole thing like a fait accompli, which is the worst thing you can do in sport. It's like Mike Tyson and Buster Douglas. That's what the kind of the comparison I would make. And Russia did them. And fair play to Russia. They deserve to go through.
We just saw a tweet on screen a moment ago, John, from Miguel Delaney saying that Marca ran a poll on their Twitter account asking who was mostly to blame for this, and they left Perez and they left Lopetegui out of the situation. Like, I know Marca are the nationalistic newspaper of Spain as a whole. They would generally kind of fall on the side of Real Madrid, I presume. So maybe that's not representative of Spain as a whole, but it does seem that the inquest is going to start with those who are currently inside in the Spain squad, and they're not going to be looking at the 2 boys over in Real Madrid right now.
They're going to be looking at Luis Rubiales. Did he take a rush of blood to the head for wounded pride? I mean, it was ridiculous that he found out, 5 minutes before the announcement was going to be made. He deserved a bit more respect from that. But did he need to pull the trigger on Lopetegui, who had not been beaten as a Spanish, they had not lost since Euro 2016? He had great success at underage level. He knew a lot of the players like Isco, who's now been much maligned today for the fact that he had all these passes and none of them went forward. So it's like ourselves, and we had Mick and Roy. There's all the what ifs and might have beens and this and that, and who gets the blame and who doesn't, and could we not have just smoothed it out? But it's a mess, and you've got an FA and the biggest club in Spain, one of the biggest clubs in the world, at loggerheads in terms of the way they do business, and there's no winners in it, no winners. Would they have won the World Cup? Who knows? But they would have done a lot better they did yesterday if they'd probably had Lopetegui there. Not even really Lopetegui, but the stability that was lacking yesterday, and the lack of urgency and the lack of leadership and the lack of direction to just go and beat Russia and stop passing the ball 1,000 million times. Yeah,
it's true. Like, the knock-on effect is substantial here as well, John, because one of Russia, Colombia, Croatia, Sweden, Switzerland and England are going to be in the World Cup final, and there's no prizes for guessing which one of them are the only team to have won a World Cup. I think Sweden are the only ones to have actually, other than England, to have actually made a World Cup final. This whole thing is wide open on the side of the draw, John.
Yes, and what does it mean, Eoin and Anthony? Does it mean that the World Cup finals are going to happen before the final? Is Brazil-Belgium going to be a bit of a World Cup final? Is Brazil-France going to be a bit of a World Cup final? Or Belgium-France, if it works out that way? Now, Uruguay will have a bit to say about that. Mexico will have a bit to say about that today. But it's almost sometimes the finals can become the final before the final. I know I'm going off on some weird tangent here, but I'm trying to make sense in that. But like, if you're looking at England, I know the hype machine tends to get into overdrive there, but are they ever going to get a better chance? Are they ever going to get a better chance? We don't know what the situation is with James' fitness for Colombia tomorrow at the Spartak Stadium in Moscow. If he's not fully fit, that could swing it in England's favour. If he is fully fit, Colombia will have a big chance. Sweden and Switzerland are good teams, but we're not talking about them as world beaters. We're talking about them as highly organised, efficient teams that punch above their weight. Croatia, you'd have to expect will be in the semi-final. Good midfield, but a lot of, I mean, how many new players do they have? Really, yeah. Rebic is a new player, Vojevic, but yeah, in terms of use, I mean, they've been around a while. Once again, if I saw Croatia against Brazil, would I be back in Croatia? No. So it is wide open, and I kind of expected Croatia and Denmark to go to penalties last night. Had a feeling from earlier in the day it would be a tricky contest for Croatia. That's how it went. Kasper Schmeichel was brilliant. 3 penalties saved, but you have to give credit to Modric, missing a penalty in extra time and then scoring that penalty in the shootout. As a friend of mine, Steve Roberts, reporter in Liverpool, pointed out to me, this is actually quite a good point. Should there be a thing in football where there's a penalty goal given like a penalty try? Because Rebic, it was an open goal. He would have scored. It was it was going to be a goal. And then does the penalty kind of reduce the advantage, if that makes any sense?
It's an interesting... It's an interesting one, John, but it takes the element of jeopardy out of it, surely. I mean, it's the moral dilemma you have that's going in on Rebic yesterday. Do you take him down? Do you not? Do you make it look like you're going for the ball? Do you not? Do you do what Suarez did? It just adds a whole level of grey area, which makes football so fascinating sometimes.
Yeah, it does. It's just something to put out there to the audience, the listeners. A penalty, because in a very extremely clear situation, if you have a VAR and all that kind of thing, to bring in a situation where you have like an open goal, it would have been a goal, and like a rugby and a penalty try, it's almost a decision made. That would have been a goal. Like I think the grey areas are probably mean that it wouldn't work, but I think it's a good thought. It's an interesting subject and an interesting question, I felt. Yeah. But Croatia and Russia down now in Sochi on Saturday, and we got 2 more games to look forward to today. I thought after Saturday, guys, this World Cup couldn't get any better after Argentina-France, and then we had what we had yesterday. So I never expected it to happen. I don't think half of Russia did either. Yeah, we're going to get stuck into a little bit more of the weekend's action with you on World Cup Daily from 12:30 later on, John. John, take care for the time being. We'll chat to you soon. All right, lads, take care. As I say, we're going to come back to World Cup later with Kevin as well on today's show, but here's some Fergal Conway.
I suppose heart and mouth stuff at the end, a couple of bad turnovers even for myself, just but look, delighted that we grinded it out anyway, and something to get.
And we appear to have lost Fergal Conway there. We'll get back to that in just one moment. Kevin is up after 9 o'clock this morning. He was also at that Spain game yesterday. An incredible night for Russia, an incredible night as well for Spain. There will be far-reaching consequences from this. I think we can get back at Fergal Conway now. We're going to turn to the GAA in just a moment because the qualifier draw is about to kick off in a minute or two. So here is Kildare's Fergal Conway. He's just speaking after Mayo, after a brilliant win against Mayo in Newbridge, of course, on Saturday night.
Heart and mouth stuff at the end. A couple of bad turnovers even for myself, just but look, delighted that we grinded it out anyway, and something to get.
Have you had many experiences as intense as that?
No, probably not. No, thanks. Yeah, very intense. Like, great support from Mayo and Kildare. Like, Mayo always travelled very well, so they serious support behind them, and yeah, just the atmosphere was electric, and just brilliant that we came out the right side of it.
Newbridge or nowhere is what you said, and you took a stance, and it's worked out very well. What an occasion it was. What's the week been like as a Kildare player?
Yeah, it's been fairly mad, if I'm honest. I suppose as players, we just it was put to us that we were going to just stand by Newbridge. That's where we wanted to be, in our home venue. And look, once we made that decision Monday or whenever it was, that was it. Then we came in Tuesday, mentioned it briefly before training, and then just had put it to bed, like, because you can't, like, this Mayo team is quality, like they've shown over the past how many years. So we couldn't be worrying about the pitch. We had to focus on them. Thank God we came out the right side. But Super 8 is our goal, and we still have next weekend now, quick turnaround, so let's focus on that.
Yeah, Fergal Conway there speaking to Nathan Murphy after Saturday's win in Newbridge. Like, where does this moment rank in terms of great GAA moments? Because it's going to be a reeling in the ears moment.
It will be a reeling in the ears moment, yeah. It's definitely up there. Like, I think maybe even the ramifications of it aren't even being kind of, fully considered at the moment, in the fact of what they have done last week and the way. Like, people kind of got lost in some of the arguments in this. They were kind of saying, the money thing, and what is it, it's the health and safety issues. And then people were kind of saying, no, about setting the precedent now, and that if the GAA go down this road, well, then you'll have all these teams kind of, flexing their muscles to demand things. this was a very simple situation in the fact of the big thing was that if they had appealed, I think, a situation. So if they had been forced and if they went for an appeal, they probably would have won the appeal, right? And that was the kind of thing that I think then the CCCC decided, we actually don't have the legal side on our side here. We could get turned over here. So I think that and only then is when they backed down, because I couldn't believe that they GAA kept going double down. Like, I mean, you'd Ned Quinn, you'd Nicky Brennan, you'd different fellas coming out and saying, whether it was the Kildare Mayo supporters killing each other outside looking for tickets, and then it went to, the health and safety aspect, and then it went to, well, if we just throw a few bob at it, maybe that'll sort it all out. It was just kind of like, oh, come on, don't be insulting everyone's intelligence here. Like, I mean, just tell the facts. Like, I mean, we wanted to have a double header in Croke Park. We thought maybe Kildare would want that, but I have to say, O'Neill, it was an immense pressure on him, and maybe it was a shot to nothing as well. Maybe O'Neill would have been finished with that team if they were being beaten. Maybe he was kind of saying, well, listen, if this is my swan song, I'm going to go out on my own terms to a certain degree. And he galvanised. And an awful lot of times you will get those situations where you need to galvanise and you need to pull in, and posting the old stuff up on the wall these days, that stuff doesn't work anymore. Like, I think you need to get something that really needed to unify that and give them a cause, I think, Kildare. And this certainly gave them a cause. And you could see that right from the off the other night. They were 7-2 up. They probably should have been 11-2 up. Like, they kicked, I think, 5 wides, and they got 4 points in 5. Like, I mean, they should have been much further ahead. And then they got dragged, reeled back in after a very quick start. But on 17th or 18th minute, they should have had probably 11 scores up. I think they were full value for it. But you could see the intensity. You could see what it meant for them, and I think it was a brave move. But I think it was ultimately and honestly, I think if they had won or lost, I think it was the right thing to do. It really was. If I was in there as a squad member, I'd be saying, absolutely, yeah, we're doing this. Yeah. And again, it goes back to this idea, especially if you remember very early on the week, it was kind of kicked back down, and GAA went, well, we're not going to make the decision. And then people started saying, well, maybe Mayo should help them out here, and maybe the Mayo squad should talk about this, or Mayo management should come out. It was nothing to do with Mayo, and it was reminiscent at the time of the 2010 thing with Meath and Louth, where it was just put back out to me to say, well, if you want to offer the replay, go ahead and offer the replay. Well, you're then dealing with people's emotions. So if the GAA had to make a decision, make it, and if it's the right decision or the wrong decision and you need to roll back on it, well, then roll back on it. But you make the decision. Don't be leaving it to players who, might be on one side of the fence. Some people might be on the other side of the fence. And to be fair to Kildare, they said, no, we're not going to back down on this. And eventually, I think, the GAA saw sense, and ultimately Kildare benefited.
Like, has this surprised you? I mean, like, we can only speculate how difficult it might have been for them to negotiate with the GAA over the last week or so. Like, did it surprise you how difficult it seemed to be for them to try and find a solution? Or, like, Ned Quinn last Tuesday when he was on the show was saying, well, we don't know when a situation is going to be found, maybe in 24 hours, maybe 48 hours. And there was a vague nature to it all, as in that kind of nature that the GAA felt this thing is going to sort itself out in the end, which must have been frustrating to a certain extent for Kildare. Like, do you think that's characteristic of the top brass when it comes to the GAA?
Well, I don't think it's characteristic, but I think it was probably a situation that they felt, okay, they might say this, but if we'll throw out our sticky tape number 1 and we'll see if that works, whatever that was behind the scenes, right? And then obviously that didn't work, and then went, okay, well, we'll need to start putting a little bit of pressure on here, number 2. And then they went down their various different remedies, and none of them were being, like, there was no kind of turning Kildare, and I think then eventually they realised, actually, these guys are pretty serious about this, and maybe there isn't.
But once they realised the rule book was against them, I guess.
Correct, and I think that was the key point. Once they kind of went, oh, okay, there is a route here, whereby if they do go here and they do appeal, well, then we're under pressure. Now, will they change the rule book? That's the question.
Of course they are.
Yeah.
Realistically.
Absolutely. They'll put the little addendum in at the bottom and be like, listen, it'll be all down to us and we'll decide it.
Like even if Kildare had won, like even if this game was in Croke Park on Saturday and Kildare had won, it still would have been a fraction of the moment that those Kildare players who were inside in Conlets on Saturday would have experienced, right? Like it would have lessened it to a certain extent. And I'm not saying that Croke Park isn't a fantastic venue, of course it is, but ultimately you're putting you're putting a crumb into like a big box.
But it's only a fantastic venue if there's over 50, 60,000 people. Like honestly, I've played in there with both. I've played in there with 80,000 people. I've played in there with 25, 30,000 people, and it was a nightmare with 25, 30,000 people. Like I did the Leinster semi-finals a couple of weeks ago. I could hear Stephen Cluxton from the press box. I could hear Stephen Cluxton calling to his defenders. So, like, I mean, you're in there. There's no atmosphere. Like St. Conleth's, even speaking to Mayo people, I was chatting to a Mayo man who's involved in Dunshaughlin, and he said the atmosphere was brilliant. He said the Mayo people loved it. Like that's like even the people coming on the pitch. Like honestly, the people say that's what the GAA is about, but that's what it is about. Like to see that families and friends, the Kildare supporters. I remember some of my best evenings where you come out in Navan or you're on the pitch, or even you go down to a qualifier. I remember we played down up there. You're on the pitch and then family come in. It brings it, like it really is. I don't know. It's a very raw feeling. Whereas Croke Park, it's nearly a corporate feeling. You enter a different stage. You go from a rural kind of an idea into a very kind of white, austere type thing, the concrete all around. You come into this big stadium, and when it's not full, you really see that as so much more. You're literally just on a pitch with just all this building around you, and it's a different dynamic to the game. It's a different dynamic to how you feel about the game. You get a great score, and it's like, yay! You don't get the same kind of passion in the crowd, obviously, and you don't get the same lift from it. Yeah. And neither does the opposition, by the way.
It's true. Like when it's good, it's good. When it's good, it's absolutely bloody amazing.
Absolutely.
But the thing is, like we'll be having this conversation like over the next couple of days, and it's a conversation we've been having over the last week or so as well. And it is the Donegal-Dublin situation. It is the first round of the Super 8, which is a fixture that's set for Croke Park on the weekend of July 14th, 15th may well clash with the World Cup final yet to be decided. Like that game, I presume you believe that game should be in Clonus as well.
Oh, that's coming. That's coming.
And when you say that's coming, do you believe that there's going to be a proper loggerheads at bay here between Donegal and the GAA, or do you believe it's coming to the fact where this game is going to be moved?
I listened to Bonner, on the show, and I listened to him his various different musings about it, and I think he's kind of giving a softly approach at the moment. In other words, he's opening the door to say, will you come through and meet us halfway on this? I think if he needs to. And no better than Donegal people, that if he needs to dig the heels in, I think he will dig the heels in. Because, by the way, he's absolutely 100% right.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, he has a potential that for being provincial champions and to go probably through the toughest province at the moment. Like, I mean, Munster, Connacht and Leinster. So the Ulster Championship is probably still the one where there's potential banana skins and everything else. A tough province to win. And his reward for that is that he gets the last game in Donegal, the last of the three, which at that stage it could be gone.
Yeah, it's true. Like the whole idea of giving a team a game in Croke Park, I can see the logic behind that because not everybody gets to play in Croke Park all the time, and this is the idea, to get more teams playing there and to get more teams big days out and all that. But when it comes to fixing the two provincial winners up against each other, like, it's patronising to say to Donegal, sure, isn't it great for you all to come down to Dublin for the day and have your day out and play the best team in the country in Croke Park? I mean, like, there's no other way of looking at it.
No,
like,
not.
It's not a neutral venue.
No, it's not a neutral venue. It's not.
Just we might come back to this in a moment, but just to bring up to speed on what's actually happening with regards to the football qualifiers. John Horan's been on the record this morning and he's been speaking about the Newbridge situation. Of course, we haven't had an apology from the GAA about that, or there hasn't been any kind of putting their hands up and admitting they're wrong. This is the closest we've got to it this morning. He says, "I'm sorry that such a situation developed between the Provincial Council and the County Board, but I'm glad that we were able to find a resolution. I think we've learned something from it. Kildare will be able to play home games in Newbridge if they make it to the Super 8s. So that is confirmed. Kildare can play games in Conlets if they want to in the Super 8s, if they make it that far. We'll know who they're playing in the next couple of moments. If they draw Cork and if they beat Cork, they will be drawn at home to play Dublin in the Super Race, which will be an extraordinary next development to see the Dubs go to Conlets. It will be quite the occasion, and it will be very interesting to see the gap between Leinster teams if this game is played in Newbridge, because Kildare versus Dublin in the Leinster Championship, there's no question that Leinster Council are playing that game in Croke Park.
Yeah.
How many points does that count for when it comes to Dublin? Who knows? There might be an answer. We get to that. Just one other piece of housekeeping from that this morning. John Horn on Michael Bublé and the Leinster final replay clash. In fairness, both Kilkenny and Galway, he says, are quite happy to play in Thurles, so that isn't an issue. That's something I'd like to change. The months of July and August should have no events outside of the GAA taking place in Croke Park. That is strong stuff from John Horn there, saying that there shouldn't be anything other than GAA taking place in Croke Park in July and August. So, that'll be interesting to see how that one develops. And as I say that, more news to bring you. So we will get back to our conversation.
No,
we have the draw in. It is Fermanagh against Kildare. It is Laois against Monaghan. It is Cork against Tyrone. And it is Roscommon against Armagh. So the first thing that is sticking out to me from there is the Cork versus Tyrone match. If Tyrone beat Cork there, they would be favourites to do it. Then Dublin are going to Omagh. And that is what the Super Rates have been set up for. For a fixture like that, the Dubs in Healy Park would be a fantastic occasion. I'm not saying for one moment that Cork are going to get beaten at the weekend. The bookies would probably favour that odds, and there is a possibility of that. Of course, the Dubs away in Páirc Uí Chaoimh would be a great occasion in itself. But in terms of two current football superpowers, could there be a chance for revenge for Tyrone against the Dubs if they beat Cork? Well, that's certainly the case. Just to kind of explain the rest of it. Fermanagh versus Kildare, the winner of that one goes into Kerry and Galway's group. The winner of Laois and Monaghan also goes into Kerry and Galway's group. Cork versus Tyrone goes into Dublin and Donegal's group, and the winner of Roscommon and Armagh goes into Dublin and Donegal's group.
Interesting. Armagh, I'll feel a little bit, because really the only one I would have felt that you don't want to get out of there was Roscommon.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not saying, but for Fermanagh, actually, Kildare will find it tricky against Fermanagh, because Kildare like to play, like a lot of Leinster teams, Leinster will try to play football against you. So, Mayo suited Kildare to a certain degree the other night. A bit of a shootout. No defensive structures really in place. Whereas Fermanagh will literally set up, in the way they have been setting up, and will say, "Come and beat us." So that could be a tricky game for Kildare. It really could. Laois, Monaghan, not really a whole pile there, to be honest, because Monaghan are kind of bouncing back. The Cork Tyrone one's a great one. Just to see have Cork anything in them at all, after the last day. But going on what we've seen, you're probably looking, as you say, Tyrone to come in, and then Dublin heading up to Omagh, which is going to bring back all of those different memories of the Battle of Omagh and everything else. So that will be, and Mickey Hart will just be licking his lips about that one.
It's true, he won't be licking his lips just yet, because there is the Cork hurdle to get over. And in fairness, this has actually been one of the positive changes, and there's been many positive changes when it comes to the new structure, and the Super 8s is going to illuminate that. The one thing that hasn't been talked about is the way this is weighted in favour of those who've lost a provincial final. And that's the way it should be. They've had the extra week to prepare, and it does kind of reward those who go a little bit further in the province. Whereas to get to an All-Ireland semi-final, you've got to win 7 games in 8 weeks. From if you went through from round 2 of the qualifiers, that's what Mayo would have had to do. So this is favouring the likes of Fermanagh, Roscommon. Certainly Roscommon have had 3 weeks. Cork and Fermanagh and Laois 2 weeks to prepare, whereas Kildare, Monaghan, Tyrone and Armagh all coming off the back of...
well, you remember a couple of years ago, it was only sometimes you'd only get a week. And it was and it was more often than not that those guys were you were beaten
after losing a provincial final.
It was really tough. The Roscommon Armagh, that again, McGeaney will relish that. He will really relish that, because I think he will be, he'll fancy bringing his brand of football, to Roscommon. Roscommon though will be, Roscommon still could have a big say in this championship, but it's the Horan thing is interesting, saying about the July and August stuff. That is really interesting stuff, because I think they're learning lessons there. And if Horan seems to be the type of man who comes out with big bold statements,
to say the least.
And I think it's going to be okay. Well, are we going to back that up? And you have to take him on his word. But that's probably I think that's a that's a smart thing to say, because, you know, okay, you've Michael Bublé or whatever coming in, but it does start to mess things up. And then if you're talking about a fixture calendar and, you know, having to change things around, you know, having events and different stuff on and concerts, different stuff on, is only going to mess things up. But yeah, like, I mean, it's you know, Galway will be happy enough. Like, I mean, there's not anything really, you know.
There's a couple of great days out there. Like, yeah. And again, I'm doing this thing, and I apologise to all those people who I'm writing off squarely, and there will be a shock this weekend, I fear. I am writing teams off here, but there is a prospect here of Kerry going to Clonus to play Monaghan. That's, if they beat Laois at the weekend. Galway in Enniskillen or Conlitz would be a great occasion. Of course, Kerry and Portlaoise would be the other one. Dublin, of course, as we say, are going to Cork or Tyrone, and then Donegal potentially in the Hyde, which would be a great occasion in itself as well. This is what the Super 8 is going to bring. We can preview all this in 7 days' time. And again, I apologise to our man, Laois, who I've particularly written off there.
Yeah, I wouldn't be writing off Armagh just yet. Yeah, but there's going to be some fantastic days, as you say, and some brilliant. And you know what? That is why it is so important to have the like. You know, I think I was watching some of the pictures from the Munster final. Like, when I was a kid, my father used to always get us in, and then you'd head to the Munster final. He just loved the Munster final. Like, I mean, there is, no matter where it is, and especially if it was in Semple, or, you know, like, I mean, you have that feeling around the square. You have that feeling of, you know, this is really it. And you're going to have, like, I mean, for people who, you know, don't go to many GAA matches, instead of going into Croke Park and doing your corporate and you're up in the premium and you're kind of, you could be really anywhere, head to one of those venues. Go to one of those venues, you know, go down the night before, experience the whole thing, being around the whole place from early on the day. That is just, it'll be brilliant, it'll be fantastic. And you know what, the Dublin supporters, who I'd say at this stage are absolutely sick of going into Croke Park and seeing the same old stuff, hiding's being dished out. This is going to be fantastic for them. And
nobody is ever saying that this is Dublin's fault, particularly not the supporters' fault, because they're brilliant. Like, part of me hopes Cork surprise Tyrone at the weekend and see all the dubs down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. It's a fantastic new facility. And Cork will obviously be going into that game on a big high one as a result of beating Tyrone. And then similarly, it'll be great to see Dublin up in Oma. Like, and even the Kerry man in me is getting excited at the prospect of potentially going up to Clonus, play Monaghan. I've never been to Clonus. No Kerry fan has really been to Clonus. It's fantastic, of course. It goes back to the whole idea that the rich are being rewarded here. None of the weaker counties are getting, or the so-called weaker counties are getting this reward of getting to travel the country like some of the top level fans are. We'll come back to that in just a moment. You are watching OTB AM. It's live with Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products. Now, Conor McKeown is joining us next to talk the hurling from yesterday, the draw in Croke Park, and the win for Cork in Thurles. But first, here's James O'Connor on Cork's second half, and Tommy Walsh on what Brian Cody and Micheál Donoghue will have said to their teams after yesterday's drawn Leinster final at headquarters.
Yeah, well, I think it's the nature of these matches, Dave, that, you know, there are going to be ebbs and flows, and teams are going to have periods of dominance and periods where they're maybe under the caution. It's how you deal with those, and sometimes limit the damage when you're not going well and capitalise on it when you're on top. And that's something that Cork are very, very, very good at. And, like, they have been under the cosh at times, Dave, but they've been under the cosh against serious teams. You know, I mean, Waterford in the All-Ireland final last year, Limerick, we all know, were a coming force. Tip, you know, are gone, but, you know, have been as good as Galway, and they're thereabouts them over the last 3 or 4 years. So, you know, it's not as if Cork have been, you know, under the pressure against teams that don't have quality players. They have, but they have been really impressive, in particularly in the closing stages of matches, when, you know, the questions have really been asked. They've been able to make the right decisions, take the right options, and that was certainly evident today, where, you know, there was never a hint of panic. And to win the tight matches, you know, you need composure, you need to be efficient, and Cork are ticking all those boxes. And, you know, the changes I think that John Moyles and the management made as well, you know, they've got to take credit for, because they got Damien Cahalane, you know, away from John Conlon. He put the shackles on Shane O'Donnell and kept him quiet for the rest of the game. He was substituted. David Reedy went in and he was subsequently taken off. And, you know, the rest of the defence, I think, stood up and they raised their intensity levels and their work rate out the field. And that affected, obviously, the quality of ball that was going into Conlon and the inside Clare forward line. So, you know, Cork have conceded fewer goals than any other team in the Championship, Dave, coming into today. You know, only Dublin have conceded less. You know, they'd obviously not be happy with 3 this afternoon, but they're scoring and averaging 27 points. They hit 30 today, you know, when you factor in, I suppose, the 2 goals as they got. And if you score 30 points in this year's, in the Championship, Dave, you know, it's going to take serious opposition to beat you. And they'll feel that, you know, if Galway win in the Leinster final, as we expect they will, that then they can't meet them until the final. And we know Cork's record against Galway in All-Ireland finals. So, yeah, they're a serious side.
Would I be right in saying that perhaps Brian Cody is going to go home this week and tell his team, that's great, keep doing what you're doing really, really well, whereas Michael Donoghue might perhaps be getting the hairdryer out?
Yeah, I'd say he will, because, you know, like, we have to remember this is a new year. This isn't like a year where you go through your knockout games one after another, maybe 3 or 4 weeks between each game, that you can bring lads down to earth and then suddenly motivate them. This Galway team have had 4 games already in the championship this year. This is their 5th game, and it is difficult. Like we've seen that in both the Munster and the Leinster round robin stages. It's hard to keep going week after week, and I think that's a credit to the Galway lads, that even when they weren't at their best, they were able to stick in there. Like, how many times have Galway played really well in the past and got beaten? Today they didn't hurl at their best and drew the game.
Yeah, Tommy Walsh there speaking at Croke Park after the draw in the Leinster hurling final yesterday. Conor McKeown of the Herald joins us on the line now. Good morning to you, Conor.
Morning, lads.
We may as well start with that one. Kilkenny against Galway yesterday, 18 points apiece. They go to Thurles next Sunday at 3 o'clock, which is a fairly controversial decision, but it should be a good event in itself. The more you watch this Kilkenny team and the more you watch Brian Cody and this kind of cohort of youngsters he's got in the squad, the more you start to feel that he's getting closer and closer to finding his best team. And I think there was evidence of that in quite a number of sections in yesterday's match.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought in a lot of the cases, some of the younger players on the Kilkenny team were some of the best. Some of them were the ones who performed better than anybody else. Like, he didn't make the final 3 last night on the Sunday game man of the match, but I had James Maher down as my man of the match just for what he did in midfield in an area where you'd have expected Galway to get more out of David Burke, but I thought Maher was really, really good. He added a great bit of energy to the midfield for Kilkenny. It was funny the way the game panned out yesterday, because we've spent so much time over the last couple of years talking about systems in hurling, with teams playing with extra men back and sweepers. But like we actually had an old-fashioned de facto 15-on-15 game here. Like, there's nobody left spare men for short puckouts, and both goalkeepers went long on both puckouts. But strangely, like, by half time, the game had never really caught fire, and we didn't really have much more than a whiff of a goal chance. And I think in a lot of cases, the defenders were like, a lot of the ball that was coming in was long. Like, Eoin Murphy had the win in the first half, and his puckouts were going 85 metres, but the ball was coming in and dropping high, and it's just manna from heaven for defenders. So, like, I think the ball that was going in yesterday to both sets of forwards line was probably more sympathetic to defenders, and maybe that's why we didn't really get the sort of game I suppose the two teams Billin should have demanded, because there's some serious forwards that were on show yesterday that never really got going.
But did it surprise you then, Conor, that the management teams didn't change it up? Considering the day, considering the conditions, and as you say, considering the forwards that were on show.
Yeah, well, I think they're both just sort of tactically inclined to play that way. There's obviously a lot of hard work that goes on from half forward lines, but I looked down when the ball was up inside the Kilkenny 45, and really it was only the 2 midfielders in either team that were dropping into their own defence, which doesn't really, usually you would have 2 or 3 half forwards even. All the Galway forwards scored from play, but none of them really caught fire. Like, Niall Burke had an excellent game in the corner, but he kind of pinched 4 points. I'm not sure it was he had one of those days where he probably got about 5 possessions and got 4 points off it. But again, it comes down to, there's no substitute in hurling for having a strong fullback and a strong centre back, and both number 3 and both number 6 for both teams yesterday were really, really strong. As ever, Daithí Burke was immense a fullback for Galway. Gerald McInerney, he probably didn't have his finest game, but he was under a lot of pressure because Eoin Murphy just rained every single puck out down on top of him and TJ Reid, and I thought he coped really well in the circumstances. And then on the other team, I thought Pádraig Walsh and Cillian Buckley were exceptional. Like, they cleared an awful lot of ball, they won an awful lot of ball over their men. But I have to say as well, Joey Holden, who played wing back yesterday, who a couple of years ago had a rough year in a full back. I thought he was really, really good, and Paddy Deegan had some great moments as well. So it was a weird game. Galway were sloppy, and they probably made the more mistakes, and they were the team that you would look at and say they are the one that didn't perform as close to their potential as Kilkenny did, and they probably have a fair distance to improve before they go to Thurles next Sunday.
Yeah, there was obviously those quotes from Burke leading up to the match during the week last week about Kilkenny fearing Galway and all that sort of stuff. But do you think, maybe I'm reading too much into it yesterday in terms of the way Galway underperformed, as you mentioned there, is there still an element of seeing Brian Cody on the sideline and looking at the black and amber and thinking to themselves, crap, this is Kilkenny once again, and there is still that mental element from a Galway perspective?
Well, I think if any team are going to put the fear of God into you, it's going to be Kilkenny. Like it's a little bit like, you know, they reckon the reason the Yankees won so many games is because of the pinstripes. I wondered for 10 years whether those black and amber stripes had the same effect on a lot of hurling teams, because but like Galway traditionally wouldn't have suffered from that affliction. Like if you go back through Brian Cody's reign, like some of the biggest defeats that he had when Kilkenny were in their absolute pomp were inflicted on them by Galway. So they tend not to have had that like Kilkenny don't tend to have that effect on Galway, and Galway just took them apart in Salthill. That's only 4 weeks ago. They only scored 1-2 from play that day. So like Galway are the biggest, baddest team in town at the moment. They are the Kilkenny of 10 years ago. You know, physically they're huge, and that's why I thought the performances of Paddy Deegan in particular, with Joey Holden and Kilman Buckley as well, like they weren't just winning high ball. They were winning high ball over men that were 2 or 3 inches taller than them.
Yeah, is there an extent as well that Galway were reverting to the one rare error and one rare weakness they had last year, which was not scoring enough goals? And obviously last year they had enough points to go along with it, which they didn't have yesterday. Like they outlined a couple of incidents in the Sunday game last night where they just weren't giving the final pass. They weren't playing the man on inside to get themselves into those goal scoring opportunities. Like, do you feel that could be a problem going forward, or do you feel it was just a one-off yesterday once again?
Yeah, well, I think last year was a really interesting year that way for teams like Galway winning the All-Ireland, not scoring a goal after the Leinster semi-final when they scored 2 against Dublin. That was a really interesting development because we saw an awful lot in the league this year as well, teams playing with 7 or 8 defenders. And I suppose the knock-on, tactical thing from that is that, teams have to take their points from 70, 80 yards out. And Galway are as good, if not better than that, at that than anybody else around. But like they did have kind of half chances, if you want to call them, where like Conor Whelan got through early on and could have squared the ball across. There was a couple of times, I think it was Conor Cooney tried to double on a ball in the air and just basically took his eye off the ball or didn't make the proper connection when he could have maybe caught it and put it into the net. But again, like I don't want to harp on about it, but it was a defender's day, and a lot of the defenders performed an awful lot better than their direct markers, which is fair going because in a lot of cases they were left kind of one-on-one in space with their men in Croke Park.
Who do you think will learn more, Conor, from it yesterday? Kilkenny obviously, as you say, had to probably match up physically to a certain degree, but will they learn a bit more? Will they start to use the open spaces next week a bit more and try to keep it away from Burke and try to keep it away from that middle channel?
Well, I was really surprised that they'd actually played TJ Reid centre forward and Walter Walsh at full forward. Now, they moved Walsh out to wing forward, I think, just to get under puck-outs for the last 15 minutes of the game. But, I mean, it was the real kind of Kerry hammer to hammer thing. You put your 2 biggest guys on their 2 biggest guys and bank on winning whatever 60% of the ball off that. I just wonder whether there'll be a bit more nuance to it next week, whether they'll try and take advantage. Like, Colin Fennelly only came on for the last couple of minutes yesterday, and like a fella with that sort of pace, you would have thought feeding off TJ Reid and Walter Walsh had to be winning a bit more clean possession. That definitely would have opened up a goal. But like, I actually think the manager who will learn more would be Brian Cody, because he's so many young players in the team. Like Billy Ryan played yesterday, and I'm not sure that Billy Ryan even get a run in the league. He's kind of plucked straight from the under-21 team that beat Dublin last week in the Leinster semi-final in Parnell Park. He scored 2 points yesterday, but he must have won 5 or 6 balls in front of his man, and he had 3 wides, and he looked like he had an awful lot of energy, and he looked like he was kind of, bold as brass. He wasn't perturbed by the occasion or, the team that he was playing. And like, it's a strange thing to say, but over the last couple of years, Kilkenny have struggled to find 2 consistent, prolific corner forwards to play either side of, Walter Walsh. Richie Hogan got on for the last couple of minutes yesterday as well, and I don't know physically what kind of shape he's in, but he played 2 absolutely beautiful passes, one of which nearly set up the winner for Walter Walsh. It was just slightly too high, and by the time Walsh caught the ball, he was surrounded. But if Richie Hogan can get on the pitch and they can get Colin Fennelly back into the whole of his health, I actually think Kilkenny could go and win this game next Sunday. I still think Galway are favourites for the All-Ireland, but I just think there'd be an awful lot of Kilkenny players that will be more certain about their roles in the team or their positions in the team, and I think Brian Cody will be an awful lot more happy with how his defence are performing against the best attack in the country.
Just since you brought up Richie Hogan there, Conor, let's have a look at what Tommy Walsh was saying about him yesterday.
At the same time, though, they still needed Richie Hogan to come in and help them out. I'd hazard and say that perhaps without the arrival of Richie Hogan, Galway would have won today. Would I be right there?
Yeah, it's like, you see, the special players make things happen when they're not on. We've seen it twice in the second half. The ball was in, he picked it up. So, you know, most players would try and go through the tackle, and suddenly you're bunched up again with the physicality of that Galway backline. But no, Richie, he looked around. He didn't go to go past his players. Looked around. Suddenly he was on the Cusack stand side of the field. Drove a ball 30-40 yards across to the far side where Enda Morrissey was waiting, the half back, and an easy point it looked like. But that's why Galway have been doing so well, because they make things look easy. That's what special players do. So I think Richie Hogan coming back in, doing what he has done, is going to give Kilkenny more belief. Lads, we have class. Look at what we can do as well. And I think it's setting Kilkenny up. I'd be thinking Galway will be the favourites, but I think with Richie Hogan back, it's going to give us the extra spark, and I think we'll have a chance.
Yeah, it's a good point there, Conor, isn't it? Like, he mentioned that Enda Morrissey point and the crossfield ball for that. It was just unbelievable vision. And if Galway do manage to impose their physicality on Kilkenny next week, it does mean that running into the half-forward line is not going to be an option. It means that the big high ball into the full-forward line is not going to be an option. It means that somebody like Richie Hogan and his crossfields pucking at a ball could be absolutely vital to their chances next Sunday in Thurles.
Well, I think what was really noticeable about Richie Hogan's two passes was they actually stood out because there was so few of that kind of passing going on in the game. Like, whoever was winning the ball was just looking up, looking into the forward line and picking which man they were going to give it to, whether that was into a pocket of space in front of a corner forward or just, as it was in a lot of cases, they just put the ball straight down on top of the full forward line. Whereas when Hogan came on, like all great players with great touch, when he get the ball into his hand, he always looked like he had an extra half a second, and he had the peripheral vision and the wrist to kind of pull off those passes in very tight spaces. So, yeah, like I don't know physically what sort of shape Richie Hogan's in. He's obviously worked very, very hard to get himself on the pitch, but that kind of creativity in that kind of really, really intense atmosphere, because like while the game didn't really catch fire, it was always very intense. It was always very physical. Like, it wasn't for a lack of energy. It was probably just the game just lacked maybe one really sort of, I don't know, just one moment to light the thing on fire. I thought the save that Eoin Murphy had early in the second half, if Galway had got a goal there, we could have been in for a much more kind of end-to-end kind of game. But no, just on Richie Hogan, like, if they can get him on the pitch for longer, he would be a massive addition, and he'd be a massive help to the rest of the Kilkenny forward line, because he is an incredible creative force when he gets on the ball.
Yeah, just a final point then on this one ahead of Sunday. Obviously, because of Michael Bublé in Croke Park, the game's been moved out of the province. So you've got a Connacht team against a Leinster team in a Munster ground. It's kind of gathered a little bit of controversy because of what happened with Waterford this year and the fact that they weren't allowed to play their home games in Nolan Park because it was outside the Munster jurisdiction. It does seem, though, on a separate case-by-case basis, that Thurles is the perfect venue for this replay on Sunday, given the circumstances.
I think it is, and neither manager was making any big deal about it yesterday. Brian Cody had a bit of a laugh when we informed him who was playing at the concert. He wasn't particularly au fait with the works of Michael Bublé. But
that's a disgrace.
No, like it is funny, and I think Colin Keys made the point on Off the Ball. I was listening to him going down to Newbridge on Saturday, but like, I think for the GAA to host fixtures like they did in Newbridge the other night, and for that to be, you know, to give teams to be able to play home advantage in big games. A lot of grounds around the country are in need of an upgrade, and I think even at a local level, clubs are struggling nowadays to facilitate the numbers of players that they have at juvenile level, just because they can't build pitches. And like, while the GAA does get an awful lot of flack for being a money grabbing organisation, are always financially geared when it comes to making their decisions. You know, like, sooner or later, it has to be about money, you know. So if you tell Michael Bublé that he can't play a concert in Croke Park because, you know, they might need it for a Leinster final replay, like, that's 2 million or whatever it is in revenue that the GAA don't have, that can't filter down to improve their facilities at local level. So, I think in this case, we're not in the worst situation of all time, albeit the pitch in Thurles didn't look like it was in great nick yesterday. They'll probably have to have some improvements of that during the week to host a decent Leinster final replay.
No, yeah, you're banging the money there. You could actually see it on TV, really. You didn't need to be in the ground to see how bad the surface was in Thurles. And I don't think the weather's going to change too much over the course of the next couple of days. We will focus, though, for the time being, on what did happen yesterday in Thurles between Clare and Cork. It was Clare 319, Cork 224. And I guess to use that old adage that you can always judge a team on how well they're coached and how well they're managed, on how well they perform in the third quarter of the match, and Cork hands down won in that section of the game. And it is credit to John Moyles, who was harbouring a good bit of criticism earlier in the year, Conor.
Yeah, it's a great win for Cork. I mean, 2 Munster titles in a row was not to be sniffed at in any era, but particularly how they had to win it this year, that's like it's incredible achievement. I have to say, I left the house yesterday at half time to go to Croke Park, fully sure in the knowledge that Clare would be Munster champions by the time I arrived there. And then I arrived in Croke Park press box with 10 minutes left to go, and not only had Cork seized the advantage, but Clare looked like they were all out of energy. Like they looked like, I know they got a goal late on to kind of put a bit of drama into it, but Cork, when they turned the screw, when they made those changes, it looked like they completely seized the advantage. But early on, it just looked like John Conlon was unplayable. He looked like he was going to have one of those days when he was going to define the Munster final. And even early on, when Colin Spillane was shifted onto him, I think Conlon did a fair bit of damage. But I don't know why Clare didn't move him. John Conlon has played centre forward in the championship already. He's a very prolific centre forward, but they just could not win a ball. And I think it was the 63rd minute before Clare moved him from the full forward line, where he was just getting absolutely starved the ball. And in the meantime, all of Clare's passes were landing in that centre forward zone. It was landing towards Peter Duggan, and Christopher Joyce was actually having a field day there, just winning ball and being able to distribute it at his leisure. So there's a few things went into it. Like, Cork obviously made the right changes, but I was just watching on the Sunday games. There's a couple of really poor lapses in concentration with regards to kind of marking from a couple of players, Tony Kelly included. And when you're playing a team like Cork, a team that kind of keep possession the way they do, and where their movement is so kind of orchestrated and predefined, you just can't switch off. You just can't switch off. And again, look, I have to say, Darragh Fitzgibbon as well, as a player for the last couple of years, I just thought was going to... I just think he's been a revelation. And when Cork put him at centre forward, I actually think that was the most important switch in the entire game, because his pace is just incredible, and he's so positive when he gets on the ball. He just creates havoc back there.
We were just saying, Conor, that 1-1 before half time for Cork just seemed to put like a knife through Clare. We were kind of mentioning, you could imagine the dressing rooms at half time. Clare obviously after playing a serious amount of hurling and only being 4 up, whereas they could have been looking at 8 or 9 up, and it seemed to really rejuvenate Cork. And I couldn't believe how flat Clare were in the second half.
Yeah, and the funny thing about the goal was, despite the fact that Clare were in the ascendancy, if you look at it again, Seamus Harnedy calls for a puck out. Now, Harnedy is obviously a very obvious target for a puck out, but nobody tracked Luke Meade's run. He ran 20 metres and nobody went with him. So, if Clare are being very analytical about themselves and they're being very positive towards making something out of the summer, there's very specific and easy areas for improvement. People have assigned men. Now, there might be something more complex going on here, in certain situations, players don't mark other players when they go into a certain zone. They have to pass men on, but it didn't look like that yesterday. Bill Cooper scored 2 points yesterday that he was completely unopposed. One came from a puck out and another a long ball from Daniel Carney. And I think I don't want to take credit away from Cork, because they were brilliant and they're worthy Munster champions. But Clare will feel themselves that they only really have themselves to blame this morning.
Yeah, we'll leave the hurling there for the time being, Conor, but before we let you go, we're just keen to get your take on the Super 8s, and as a result of the qualifier draw this morning for round 4. You were in Newbridge, of course, on Saturday night, and we've been speaking about that this morning, but the other kind of big movement that might occur, I guess, over the next week or two is Declan Boner and his comments last week on Off the Ball, or on Saturday's Off the Ball, about looking to move Dublin versus Donegal, to a different ground, to a neutral venue as such. Like what we're seeing from our viewers and our listeners at the moment is the old anti-Dublin bias is what we've been, the stick that's been used to beat us with. Like, I'm not sure if you agree with that this is just usual anti-Dublin bias from us here and off the ball, or is there an actual case to be made here that this game should be moved, for fairness' sake, to Clonus or to a different provincial ground?
Well, there's definitely a cause to say that the game should not have been fixed for Croke Park in the first place. Like, that was a decision that was taken at Congress when he had delegates there in the GAA. Nobody actually thinks of what the resulting action is going to be until you're faced with the week of it. So, like, I think it's probably something they're going to have to look at in the future. But I would imagine that because Congress has decided, like, those games aren't neutral venue fixtures, they're Croke Park fixtures. I was just looking at the ruling the other day. So, like, it would take something major for that game not to take place in Croke Park. And then you would have the Dublin game against their designated home game. Like, that's up to Dublin to nominate a venue as their nominated home venue. So I would say that the likelihood at this stage is definitely that Dublin are going. I'd say it would be 95% certain that Dublin will play 2 of their Super 8 games in Croke Park. Whether that's fair, like, you know, you could sit here and argue all morning, but, like, that's probably something that needs to be looked at before the start of next year, because, like, in as much as I think everybody, you know, needs to be fair about venues and all the rest of these things, like, we can't keep just changing the decisions the week before the games or 2 weeks before the games. Like, these are decisions that are taken by the delegates from all the counties that are involved. But like a lot of things in GAA democracy, they tend not to think of their actions until such time as they're actually faced with the reality.
But I think that's one of the main issues, Conor, is the fact that, you know, these decisions are taken, you know, months previous, and you know, the ramifications of them, you know, either way, in a positive or a negative way, aren't really thought through. And most people who go to, you know, the Congress situation, you know, okay, I'm sure lots of people, you know, delve through and actually read these, you know, the various different things 100%. But there's plenty who just go and, you know, if it's a yay or a nay, they just kind of go with the crowd. And unfortunately, what happens is you get situations like this, and there's then piecemeal stuff done, and, you know, stuff is thrown out, and, you know, it's something that really needs to be thought through. And as you say, needs to be fixed before next year, because it is an unfair situation, and it will only continue.
Yeah, I think so. But the other way looking at it too is, and I don't want to sort of, like, I don't want to hang on, like, on the side of Dublin should play the game in Croke Park. Like, you know, I think that Dublin versus Cork or Tyrone game, either in Páirc Uí Chaoimh or Omagh, is just going to be incredible. Like, that's going to be one of the highlights of the summer. Like, when you envisage Dublin playing a big away game in the championship, like, Healy Park was one of the places. Healy Park or Castlebar were the 2 places where I thought, now that would be some atmosphere. So that's going to be an incredible one. And if you had 2 of them, absolutely, I think it would add to the summer. But I think Croke Park are in a situation now where, say, the 4 All-Ireland quarter-finals no longer exist, and they were fixed for Croke Park in previous years. So now we're talking about taking one of the 2 Super 8 games out of Croke Park. So, like, we're getting to a situation where nobody really wants to play in Croke Park anymore. So they're trying to figure out, like, what, other than Michael Bublé concerts, what exactly are we using the stadium for? So, I think for Croke Park to take that game out of Croke Park, or for the CCC, or for some arm of the GAA to take one of those games out of Croke Park, they would have to take the less lucrative and the option with the most hassle, and I'd say that's probably unlikely at this point.
Yeah, I think we can probably agree with you on that front anyway, Conor. Conor, thank you very much for taking the call this morning.
Enjoy Michael Bublé next week.
I'll see you there.
Conor McKeown of the Herald chatting to us. Yeah, it's an interesting one. Just, like, coming back to, there was one other thing I wanted to ask you about when it came to Clare and Cork yesterday, and it was the situation with Damien Cahalane and the whole process of moving him off John Conlon and moving a different player onto him, and Cahalane having a stormer after that. He played really well after he was taken off John Conlon, and there seems to be the school of thought where if a fella's getting roasted by a guy, you bench him straight away. You hook him immediately and you get a new fella in there. Yeah. Whereas with John Moyles yesterday, he just moved his chess pieces around a different way, and Cahalane, who's clearly a proven top-class defender, managed to thrive with a different marker. Like, I mean, credit has to go to Moyles for that, because there could have been a knee-jerk reaction easily. Yeah,
it's a great point. It's a fantastic point, actually, because it is that type of thing. You know, you defenders sometimes, you know, where you're under a lot of pressure. There's a lot coming in. You're marking a guy like Conlon. He has you understand, just everything is going his way, which they did in spades in that first 30-odd minutes, and clean up a little bit of the naive defending, I shall say. I think they'll still be thereabouts.
Yeah, I think you're right on that one. Like, I was thinking, how much are they going to be at to win the All-Ireland now? all that in the first half. Thankfully, I didn't put any money on him after what happened.